Are they literally telling you that you've got to get rid of a third of livestock farming in the Netherlands?
No, they don't tell it in that direction. They tell we have to save the nature, and therefore we have to reduce the ammonia. It's a sort of nitrogen, and when we have to reduce it, well, then several farmers have to shut down because they are too close to nature, and they have to reduce not only 30%, they have to reduce up to 95%. So that's impossible. So there are farmers who are literally living there for centuries, in the family, always working with nature, and all of a sudden now they have to disappear because of this ammonia. And well, the farmers are not against nature, never against nature. They have to live in nature and they have to work with nature. But it's unbelievable that all of a sudden now they have to get away so close to nature. And farmers are not convinced that it is going to help nature. That's the big point.
Eric, is this something that is being done by a series of European countries individually? Is it something being done by European Union directives? You know, how and why has this initiative taken place? Well,
Europe says you have to preserve nature, especially Nature 2000 areas. They have to be preserved by the government. The government has to make measures to preserve it. Where it went wrong is that the Dutch government only made nitrogen, oxygen and ammonia as the only one element which will tell you if nature is well preserved. And that's absolutely crazy because there are far more other parts who are important. For example, hydrological ways is very much more important. I have an area here close by, also Nature 2000 area. There are growing plants who should not be growing there by the models who are made by the government, but still they are growing there. So there's a big difference in what do you see in the fields and in these areas, and what does the models tell you what there is, and that's bigger problem. There are more countries, but the only way the Netherlands have made it in this direction, what the European measures were told to do, well, that's different. So, for example, I live close to the German border, also a nature area. Yeah. It's over the border also. On the Dutch side, farmers have to leave their farms. On the other side, in Germany, they can build farms close to this area. Dutch farmers are mad about this, of course.
No, I can see, and the protests have been prolonged, and they really are quite on a huge scale. I expect the French farmers and smallholders to protest. I never thought we'd see it in the Netherlands. Eric, thank you for joining us and explaining what is going on there. Well, I'm joined now by Andrew Meredith, editor of Farmers Weekly. As I said, you know, the French farmers always protest, and smallholders particularly. This is astonishing. I mean, what he's saying here is that the European Union's Natura 2000 project says that because of all these livestock, there's too much ammonia, too much nitrate going into the soil, and therefore big cuts to basically the meat production. I mean, that's what we're really talking about here. And I've railed on this show about the fact that we're not producing our own energy anymore in the neighbour same with the planet, and now we're not going to produce much of our own food. Now, we are, of course, outside of the common agricultural policy with Brexit. We haven't quite worked out, I don't think, well, we're beginning.
We're on the way.
Yeah, we're beginning to work out our farming policy, and which is a good thing. What do you make of what's going on?
Well, I think, first of all, the important thing to say is if meat consumption is not falling, then if we cut meat production here or in the Netherlands, consumers would expect that product to come from somewhere else. And what British farmers would tell you if they were sat here now is that they have some of the highest production standards in the world. So it seems perverse to move that production overseas to somewhere with a lower standard, meaning that we can't, you know, have our own food security, and we're also not benefiting the environment globally.
We'd import meat from Brazil or from chicken from Thailand or whatever it may be.
Yes, and we're not self-sufficient in all those products now, but it would mean the proportion of that would go up, And a farmer would rightly say, is the environmental net benefit actually happened here, or are you just punishing British farmers without having that tough conversation with the public? You know, if they really believe this, they need to say, you need to start eating less meat, and people to actually buy into that. But until that happens, I think, you know, farmers will be happy to be led by the consumer, but being pushed into it by government is harder to take.
So is this an EU revolt? And are you worried that this kind of thing is going to happen to British farmers or not?
I think, as you touched on there, it does come down to attitude. You know, the French farmers, you know, they are quick out onto the streets to wave a placard. It's exactly 20 years since the last significant British farm protest, and that was in the dairy sector over perpetually low milk prices. And we've seen some reform in the supply chain there, and there's more to do, I'm sure, that the farming lobbies would say, to still rebalance it in terms of fairness. But are we going to see farmers on the streets in the short term over here? I don't think so, but everyone's got a breaking point.
At the last Conservative conference, Boris Johnson said we're going to rewild 30% of the English countryside. It was a Build Back Better conference, and he said build back beaver, and now we hear that bison are being introduced into woodlands near Canterbury in Kent. Has the Ukraine crisis, have worries about food security? Is rewilding now finished? Are we having a more sensible look at all of this?
Look, it's up to individual landowners what they do with their land, as long as it's within the bounds of the law. And if somebody wants to, you know, take up a great amount of charity money or their own private money and put in bison, good luck to them. I think that there has definitely been a renewed appreciation of the value of not self-sufficiency, but certainly improved food security. And the government has committed in the last couple of months to at least maintaining where we are in terms of food production of what we can produce here in the UK. But they've not really put that in legislation. They've not attached any funding to that. So at that moment, it is just a verbal commitment. And of course, you know, with everything that's going on in Westminster, who knows the future direction?